teaching school in a stable and a hen house, reading buds.
After consultation with the citizens of Tuskegee, I set July 4, 1881, as the day for the opening of the school in the little shanty and church which had been secured for its accommodation. They, the white community, questioned its value to the colored people and had a fear that it might result in bringing about trouble between the races. Some had the feeling that in proportion as the Negro received education, in the same proportion would his value decrease as an economic factor in the state. On the morning that the school opened, 30 students reported for admission. I was the only teacher. The students were about equally divided between man and woman. Most of them lived in Macon County, the county in which Tuskegee is situated. A great many more students wanted to enter the school, but it had been decided to receive only those who were above 15 years of age and who had previously received some education. The greater part of the 30 were public school teachers, and some of them were nearly 40 years of age. With the teachers came some of their former pupils, and when they were examined, it was amusing to note that in several cases the pupil entered a higher class than did his former teacher. It was also interesting to note how many big books some of them had studied, and how many high-sounding subjects some of them claimed to have mastered. The bigger the book and the longer the name of the subject, the prouder they felt of their accomplishment. Some had studied Latin and one or two Greek. This, they thought, entitled them to special distinction. The students who came first seemed to be fond of memorizing long and complicated rules in grammar and mathematics, but had little thought or knowledge of applying these rules to the everyday affairs of their life. One subject which they liked to talk about and tell me that they had mastered in arithmetic was banking and discount. But I soon found out that neither they nor almost anyone in the neighborhood in which they had lived had ever had a bank account. Most of the students wanted to get an education because they thought it would enable them to earn more money as school teachers. Notwithstanding what I have said about them in these respects, I have never seen a more earnest and willing company of young men and women than these students were. I was determined to start them off on a solid and thorough foundation, so far as their books were concerned. I soon learned that most of them had the merest smattering of the high-sounding things that they had studied. While they could locate the desert of Sahara or the capital of China on an artificial globe, I found out that the girls could not locate the proper places for the knives and forks on an actual dinner table. I had to summon a good deal of courage to take a student who had been studying cube root and banking and discount and explain to him that the wisest thing for him to do first was thoroughly master the multiplication table. At the end of the first 6 weeks, a new and rare face entered the school as a co-teacher. This was Miss Olivia A. Davidson. Miss Davidson's experience in the South showed her that the people needed something more than mere book learning. She heard of the Hampton system of education and decided that this was what she wanted in order to prepare herself for better work in the South. Miss Davidson came to Tuskegee, bringing into the school many valuable and fresh ideas as to the best methods of teaching, as well as a rare moral character and a life of unselfishness that I think has seldom been equaled. Miss Davidson and I began consulting as to the future of the school from the first day. The students were making progress in learning books and in developing their minds. But it became apparent at once that if we were to make any permanent impression upon those who had come to us for training, we must do something besides teach them mere books. The students had come from homes where they had no opportunities for lessons, which would teach them how to care for their bodies. With few exceptions, the homes in Tuskegee in which the students boarded were but little improvement upon those from which they had come. We wanted to teach the students how to bathe, how to care for their teeth and clothing. We wanted to teach them what to eat and how to eat it properly, and how to care for their rooms. Aside from this, we wanted to give them such a practical knowledge of some one industry, together with the spirit of industry, thrift, and economy, that they would be sure of knowing how to make a living after they had left us. We wanted to teach them to study actual things instead of mere books alone. We found that most of our students came from the country districts, where agriculture in some form or other was the main dependence of the people. Since this was true, we wanted to be careful not to educate our students out of sympathy with agricultural life, so that they would be attracted from the country to the cities and yield to the temptation of trying to live by their wits. We wanted to give them such an education as would fit a large proportion of them to be teachers, and at the same time, cause them to return to the plantation districts and show the people there how to put new energy and new ideas into farming. About 3 months after the opening of the school, and at the time when we were in the greatest anxiety about our work, there came into market for sale an old and abandoned plantation, which was situated about a mile from the town of Tuskegee. The mansion house, or big house, as it would have been called, which had been occupied by the owners during slavery, had been burned. After making a careful examination of the place, it seemed to be just the location that we wanted in order to make our work effective and permanent. But how were we to get it? The price asked for it was very little, only $500, but we had no money, and we were strangers in the town and had no credit. I summoned a great deal of courage and wrote to my friend, General J.F.B. Marshall, the treasurer of the Hampton Institute. Within a few days, a reply came to the effect that he had no authority to lend me the money belonging to the Hampton Institute, but that he would gladly lend me the amount needed from his own personal funds. At the time we occupied the place, there was standing upon it a cabin, formerly used as a dining room, an old kitchen, a stable, and an old hen house. Within a few weeks, we had all of these structures in use. The stable was repaired and used as a recitation room, and very presently the hen house was utilized for the same purpose. Nearly all the work of getting the new location ready for school purposes was done by the students after school was over in the afternoon. As soon as we got the cabins in condition to be used, I determined to clear up some land so that we could plant a crop. When I explained my plan to the young men, I noticed that they did not seem to take it very kindly. It was hard for them to see the connection between clearing land and education. Besides, many of them had been school teachers, and they questioned whether or not clearing land would be in keeping with their dignity. In order to relieve them from any embarrassment, each afternoon after school I took my axe and led the way to the woods. When they saw that I was not afraid or ashamed to work, they began to assist with more enthusiasm. In the meantime, Miss Davidson was devising plans to repay the loan. Her first effort was made by holding festivals or suppers. She made a personal canvass among the families in the town of Tuskegee and got them to agree to give something, like a cake, a chicken, bread, or pies, that could be sold at the festival. It was often pathetic to note the gifts of the older colored people. Sometimes they would give 5 cents, sometimes 25 cents. Sometimes the contribution was a quilt or a quantity of sugarcane. I recall one old woman who was about 70 years of age who came to see me. She was clad in rags, but they were clean. She said, "Mr. Washington, God knows I spent the best days of my life in slavery. God knows it's ignorant and poor, but," she added, "I knows you is trying to make better men and women of the colored race. I ain't got no money, but I want you to take the 6 eggs, what I's been saving up, and I wants you to put the 6 eggs into the education of these boys and gals."